Our goal today is to help you shorten the learning curve for building a solar car. We're here to help you. One of the things that you're going to find about solar car veterans is that they want to tell you how things work, and more importantly, I think, how things don't work. They want you to be successful. Everybody at this contest pitches in to help everybody. And so when you have questions, don't be afraid to email Keith and Lee and me and Joey and everyone, because they will answer your questions and hopefully save you time and sometimes save you money, so that you don't go out and buy something that you either don't need or isn't going to work the way that you thought it would. Let's see if I can make this work. 3 levels of participation in the Solar Car Challenge. One is the Classic Division, one is the Open, I should say Open, not Opens, and Advanced Division. The Classic Division, last year won by Byron Nelson in the cross-country race. Congratulations. Some rules. Obviously, the solar cells are restricted, how efficient they can be. These cars are typically the least expensive to build of the 3 divisions. No hub motors allowed. Most of the cars run a regular brushed or brushless DC motor in them, somewhere between 48 and 72 volts, I suppose. Some of them should be higher than that. Usually off-the-shelf equipment. Standard chain drive makes the car go down the road. And they use just lead-acid batteries. We'll talk about both the cells and specific batteries much later. Lead-acid batteries are easy for students to understand. They're easy to wire together. You don't need expensive battery management systems to keep it from catching on fire or exploding or charging it. It's the simplest way to enter solar car racing. The Open Division, I think that you have the same restrictions for solar cells, right? No, is it different? There's no restrictions in solar cells now?
They can be greater.
Oh, greater than 18%? Okay. They can use any motor. A lot of the top Open Division cars are running a hub motor, so there's no chain drive system in it. The motor is built right into the rear wheel. There's lots of really, really fancy technology that goes into the Open car. This is Keith's car from Houston, Mississippi. Perennial winners. They do everything amazing. So they practice. They build nice cars that are bulletproof. They're not sitting on the side of the road. Their students practice and they win. The Advanced Division, I think this is the car that you helped with, is that right? Mm-hmm. Mr. Cave? They're limited by the cell cost, right? I mean, you can't spend, is it $10 per watt? Is that what it is for cells? But an array could be very, very expensive. If you have a, I suppose, even 1,000 watt array, I mean, that's $10,000 right there.
Earlier this week for $21,500 for 600 cells.
So $21,000 for an array like that. You can use any motor, and what typically puts cars in the Advanced Division, or what makes teams explore the Advanced Division, is the battery chemistry. You would be allowed to use a lithium polymer battery or lithium iron phosphate battery in that class. And you are allowed to use molds that are provided by engineering schools. So Purdue or MIT or California, Stanford, those kind of schools that have built solar cars, and they've taken the time to build the mold, and then you're allowed to use that mold to construct the body for your car. You're not allowed to use their body, is that right, Doctor? Right. But you're allowed to use the mold to go through the process of building a body for yourself. This is an example of that. Where did that mold come from?
It's an MIT mold.
Okay. So from MIT.
Those are the cars that are more typical in Australia, and it's virtually impossible for a high school team. I know a lot of my students came and watched this. It's virtually impossible for a high school team to come up with this car without those university molds. So these are basically university cars that you're looking at. when you build a car, when you build a mold, you're basically building that car, and you have no design. And I know Los Altos, that guy has had a hand-me-down car. It's really, really tough, and I think Mark has built his own molds in the past. It's really, really tough to come up with that mold. So when you look at this car, that would not be a design, in my opinion, that a high school student should challenge to tackle.
We're in the process of doing a mold, and it's really, really time consuming, and it's expensive to just buy the materials to do a mold. And that
Major.
Well, it's just time.
Just so you know, both of our cars are made without molds. We made it with bolt construction. We laid the ribs out and we bent the foam
Yeah.
and made it without molds.
Major time.
Yeah, it's a lot of time, but it's a lot cheaper because you're not
Sure.
making a mold.
The mold that I have, we've got Stanford's mold. The mold itself is $40-something thousand.
Yeah, well, especially if you're trying to cook it. If you gotta build it out of epoxy resins, you know, and you're cooking it in an oven, that's pretty expensive.
Can you guys hear okay in the back? Can you hear when, okay. What you really are curious about, I would guess that this is your first year. You've just already said we're going to enter the Classic Division. We've got absolutely no money. What can you do to help us build this car as inexpensively and as roadworthy as possible? One year, we decided that we were going to build a solar car as inexpensively as possible. And so we set up a budget, and you know, our goal was unrealistic. We said we wanted to build a inexpensive solar car for $10,000. It cost us $11,000 when we were done, about $11,500 to have everything. That is assuming that you went out and bought it with real money. Oftentimes, when you start building a car, you'll find out that you don't necessarily need real money to buy things. That sounds awful to say. But lots of people are willing to give you stuff, or at least reduce the cost of stuff. I think when it was all said and done, our $11,000 car cost us about $5,000 out of pocket, where we had to raise $5,000 in cash to pay for it. So we'll talk about that as we go. When you get your car rolling, obviously, you start with a couple of things. We're going to break it up into a couple different categories. The materials, the roll bar and crush zones, things absolutely you're going to start out with and are mandated by the rules. When you start to build this car, I suggest that you read the rules, and then you read them again, and then you read them until you've memorized them. And then everybody else on your team reads and memorizes the rules too. I can't even tell you how many times we have got to a point where we have really screwed up because we have forgotten something, and it was a major refix to go back and do that. A lot of times that crush zone is included in that, so where you have to add on pieces so that you meet the rules.
Can I say one
Yeah.
thing? That while Keith is here, because you are the splendid example of what people do sometimes when we find that we've got a rule violation. I will never forget when your team arrived and your array was too large, and I have never seen anybody take a saw to an array and actually cut off the array right there in order to make it fit. You know, there's not a forgiveness to this. It's got to be according to the rules. That's one of the advantages of a program like this, helping young people learn the value of following the rules. And you won my heart there, Keith, because any teacher who would take a saw to their solar car array,
We had no choice.
well, it was amazing.
He saw it in protest.
Let's start out talking about what you're going to build your car out of. I'll tell you right from the beginning, I'm going to make the case for chromoly steel, 4130 chromoly steel. There are lots of options to build your car out of, but I'm assuming that you're going to have high school students building it, that you don't have an autoclave somewhere to put this fancy composite thing in, that you are going to weld it with standard welder, whether it be a wire feed type welder or a tungsten inert gas TIG welder along the way. What I like about chromoly is you can cut it again, and when it doesn't work, you can cut it off and just grind it smooth and then cut it again. And things weld together easy, it's easy to machine, and you can get it almost anywhere. chromoly, right now, 4130 chromoly comes in lots of different sizes, and I think it's about $4 a foot. I think depending on where you get it from, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the size. You can get chromoly tubing in almost any wall thickness and any diameter that you want. The car here, this one that's pictured, is almost all 0.035 wall thickness, and I think the main tubes in that are 1 3/8 in diameter. Now the roll bar part of that is all 1 1/8, and the wall thickness is 0.058. So it's a thicker wall thickness for any of the areas where we wanted to protect the driver. So it's a heavier tubing. Aluminum. Teams use aluminum. Obviously, it's harder to weld. I think it is. Anyways, people that weld aluminum well are magicians. When they lay down those perfect little aluminum beads on there, you're like, wow, that is magic. Aluminum may seem amazing as far as a material goes because it does seem really light, but in most cases, aluminum actually needs almost as much weight as chromoly to be as strong. Unless you have a way to harden the aluminum, aluminum is a finicky material. And it's not like chromoly. Chromoly tends to bend. Aluminum just breaks. It's a very brittle material. And you sure don't want it to break down in the middle of some small town, Stratford, Texas or something. Titanium, people have used it. I think this is a car that you guys have seen before. The whole thing is made of titanium. Of course, you hear about titanium being this miracle metal. You see it in lots of things. Driver heads right now in golf is a great example. The reason that we make driver heads out of titanium is because it is a springy steel. It is not a stiff metal at all. It actually bends relatively easy. And so, of course, we put it in the face of drivers so that it bends when the ball hits it. The club stays on the ball for a longer period of time, the ball goes farther. What makes it great for a driver head might not be so great for a solar car. It'd be twisty, it'd be springy, you have to add a lot of material to reinforce it. The nice thing is that it usually doesn't break, it just twists a lot. You might be able, if you were clever, you might be able to build a suspensionless solar car that used just the twist of the material to do that. The bad thing about titanium, of course, is that you can't weld it in any oxygen environment. You have to shield both sides of the weld when you do it because any oxygen that gets in there causes titanium oxide. And titanium oxide is really nothing more than a dust. It's brittle. It breaks very quickly. Last, and I'm going to have Lee talk about this for a little bit. We have built things out of carbon fiber. It is light, it is stiff, you can make it into any shape you want. It is not a good material to choose if you think you're going to break down on the side of the road in Parker, Texas. Because you can't just glue it back together and drive. You can't take it over to the local auto body shop and say, hey, can we borrow your welder and tack this thing back together. It takes a lot of planning in advance, and the learning curve is very steep, but you can build some really, really cool stuff. I know we have built a frame for, not a solar cover, for a different vehicle, just out of carbon fiber panels. And you're going to talk about that in just a second. Where we've taken panels, we've laid up the panels with carbon fiber and some kind of core material. Typically it's Nomex honeycomb, and we glue those panels together in the orientation that we want. It works really well as long as you get it right the first time, because there's not a lot of going back like with chromoly, where you can't cut it apart and then glue it back together. It doesn't work as well. Do you want to talk about what you've done?
Right now?
Yeah. Okay. The whole time? Well, do you want to wait?
No.
Good.
I don't know if you'll be able to see this at all. Maybe I can move this table and just roll it back a little bit so I can point the thing.
Yeah. You want to set it up on the table?
No.
There's a box under there.
You don't have your rear shock, man.
Rear shot. Just put it back.
How's that alignment work?
Yeah. maybe you can see it a little bit better. And you can certainly come up and see it afterwards and push it around and get a closer look at it and ask questions. My name is Lee Kaiba. I'm from New York. My garage has got a lot of things collected in it, as everybody does who does this for a long period of time. I have MIT molds, and I have the original mold of Mark's car, which I'm trying to get rid of. So if anybody wants, can I get away?
Oh, yeah, it's yours now.
If anybody wants a mold, all you have to do is go to New York and pick it up. How big is it?
It's big, it's heavy,
So there you go. There's a start. There's a start for you. I'm looking at all these bright, shiny faces. I wonder at the end of the race if they'll be that bright and shiny. It's great to know that many students in this room will follow engineering endeavors because of this challenge. They call it a challenge. Some people call it an adventure. Some people call it torture. When you have to get a car ready and you have to get, oh, the car's ready. Here we are at Texas Motor Speedway. Oh, we have to get through scrutineering. Then you get through scrutineering. Oh, we're through scrutineering. Then we have to race it. So it's just sort of goes on and on and on. But these people up here really want to help you. They're smart in solar cars. They won't tell you why. The reason we're smart in solar cars is because we've already done and made all of the mistakes. So please, if you have a question, feel free to come up and ask. We'll be more than happy to help you out. And like Mark says, maybe we can save you some time, maybe we can save you some money. So that's the idea. So then why do I have the most expensive frame that you can possibly make up here? Well, have you ever made a model, a plastic model? You just glue it together, right? Well, that's how these carbon fiber panels work. They're very expensive. How much do they cost? A 4x8 sheet would cost you maybe $1,200. So 3 sheets of that stuff is many thousands of dollars. But it might be the simplest frame to put together because all you have to do is get a circular saw and glue it together. So that's why I have this. Joey said he's putting a car together this year, and he wanted a carbon fiber panel frame. I've been working on carbon fiber tube frames, and here I'll pass this around. This is a carbon fiber tube frame, a small part of it, but this is even lighter and more expensive than the carbon fiber panel. But I mean, let's face it, carbon fiber is sweeping the auto world. All open car racers now are completely carbon fiber except for the transmission and the motor. Everything else, the brake rotors, the roll bar, everything else is carbon fiber. Will we be allowed to use carbon fiber roll bars this year, Doc?
Yeah, that's a big question.
They can send us a question by email, and we'll let Chris Jones evaluate. If they can demonstrate that it has the same strength, then yes, but they have to carry the burden of proving that it has the same strength, which is a pretty heavy burden.
Write that down.
Yeah.
It's being recorded. Oh, that's right. So originally in the New York cars, we said to ourselves, how would you go around building a solar car? Well, you start with the motor. Start with the motor. What motor can you afford? What size can you afford? When you get your motor, you know what your voltage is. You know what your current is. You know how many batteries you need to make that voltage. You know how many solar panels you should have to make that voltage. So a good place to start is with the motor. But at the Staten Island team last year, I have a really steep hill right in front of my house. I live on a lake. Come down that hill and it goes into the lake. There's a T, so it turns both ways. And we found out that something like this, if you build a frame, a rolling frame, you can use it to bring in TV cameras because somebody will push it around and the local TV, if it's moving, they'll put you on TV. If it's not moving, they don't want to talk to you. So, that helps for fundraising. You turn it sideways, it'll go in through a school door, and you can show it off. You can transport it in a Suburban. You don't need a trailer. So this is expensive material. That's true. And as Mark knows, and anybody else, this is called composite material. 2 parts: epoxy and Kevlar or carbon fiber. It's preparation, preparation, preparation. If you don't prepare, and just about everybody who's done this has horror stories of wasting $1,000 or so because you're just not, once you start to make this, there's no stopping. In 4 hours, it's solid. It's a solid mess that you can throw in the dumpster. And unfortunately, that happens a lot and adds greatly to the expense every time. If you don't practice, 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 with each part of thickened epoxy and potting bolts and things like that, there's a disaster waiting for you. But, so why do we do this with the Staten Island team? Well, that big hill in front of my house, we put this together. Yes, we put steering on it, we put brakes on it, suspension, but we didn't have to put a motor on it because all we were going to do is push it up the hill, and the students get to tow it and talk on radios and do all this teamwork stuff, talking to the people at the top of the hill. Okay, let it go. And if the student comes down the hill, it's really steep. He can do 25, 30 miles an hour. He doesn't make that turn. It's the lake. So they learn to brake and make the turn. They can do the required turning, and they didn't have to do all of the work. It comes later, putting the motor on and the drivetrain, putting the batteries in and the electricity, putting the solar on right away. They got a show and tell that they can make money on, fundraise with, and they can do all of the rolling tests. We put slalom cones on the hill, and they turn and all that. So that helps a lot. If you want to build one of these things, you can go to Solar Wiki and look up what a team next door to you, the Minnesota Solar Car team, which I think is the greatest solar car team going. Those students know everything back and forth that they do on a solar car. And they've got a method to put this together, how to mix the epoxy and what parts to get and things like that. So come up, take a look at it. This is a blown canopy. Very difficult to do. It's much easier just to take a piece of Lexan and bend it. You can bend it even in a round shape at the front, you know, to put it on the solar car. But
I think Lee brings up a great point. Once you get your car up on wheels and you roll it along, that is a pivotal point for students. It's usually at that point where kids are discouraged, where they are pretty much done. But I'll tell you, once you get it up on wheels and you can actually put kids in it and push them around, it is energizing. It completely changes things. Don't you think?
okay, yeah.
We'll move on to the next thing you have to really worry about, and really one of the most important things that we build into the solar car. That roll bar and crush zones, you always hope that you will never ever need them, but you're always glad that they're there in case you do. Bob, we built an Electrothon car one time that we rolled at 50 miles an hour. I mean, just a catastrophic roll, and thought I just killed a kid. Canopy came off, he walked away, because we had taken the time to build a sturdy and safe crash area for that student. It does have to encompass the entire driver. It has to be a fixed part of the car, so it's not something that you can take off and put on. And there's some minimum diameter and wall thickness rules. If you want to use a different material, you can always apply to Chris Jones, the technical director. He would evaluate it and then make a decision. A great example for us is that we always wanted to use a thicker chromoly that had a smaller diameter, because we had a tubing bender that would bend that tubing. We added more tubing, so in the end, I think our roll cages were stronger, and Chris recognized that and would send back and approve.
I want to say one thing. One of your dots there says allow 5 centimeters of clearance between the driver and the roll cage. That's with every driver you have, not just the one going through scrutineering. Many times people doing scrutineering will have a little skinny guy get in there who's got plenty of room within the driving area. But you've got to make sure that every one of those drivers are going to comply with this.
And it's no slouching. I mean, it doesn't help you in a rollover if your driver passed the roll bar rule by slouching. So it's I think this is one of your first cars, one of your early cars. Obviously, in this case, the roll bar is far more than the 5 centimeters, 2 inches type rule. Here's an example of one that's much closer to the driver. You can see that there's room between his head. He's sitting in his normal driving position. I put 2 views up there, what it looks like from the front, what it looked like from the side to protect him. That's 0.058 tubing there. The crush zone, one of the things that we are concerned about, especially for cross-country races, is potential impacts with other things, whether that be a stop sign, a fire hydrant, or in worst case scenario, another car. We want to build in impact areas, impact absorption areas, so that your car can withstand those kind of impacts. Do you want to talk about the car that came out of the ditch and hit the Colorado team? Do you want to mention that?
We try to anticipate every way we can to maintain safety within a vehicle. And we do this particularly on our cross-country races. We've gone to now having your car preceded by a lead car, followed by a chase car, and then a second chase car. This all coming from what happened on the Colorado team. We were on the road, and there was a lady traveling very too quickly on the highway, came up too fast, slammed on the brakes. There wouldn't have been a problem if she had run into the chase car, but she didn't. She did a donut off the side of the road and came in ahead of the chase car and hit the solar car from the side. Because this team had done such an excellent job in building their car, providing the roll cage, providing the roll bar, there was almost no damage done to the car and certainly nothing to the driver. So this is why we go so far to all these rules here. It's a good example.
And you can see here's the team from Devon Prep, where they have added significant impact materials outside of the driver area in the event of a collision. Of course, there's a rule now about how high that has to be. Is that right?
That's right.
Dr.
Because we've had some cars that had the protection way down here, but the car bumper you're going for another car would be up here. So we want to make sure that the protection is going to be at a level that would intersect something that might be trying to travel into the passenger compartment.
Here's another example of the crush zone area. In the case of this car, it had 2 areas, one an external set of tubing. Eventually, this car had more support materials here to help in the event of an impact, but it also had a small driver cage in it along the way.
Keith, you remember how we were looking at that Colorado car? Because people always say, well, we'll let the solar array be part of the crush zone. And one of the things we learned from that is when your solar array is hit, it shattered as glass going everywhere. It's not an adequate crush zone.
I know that Lee really feels very strongly about picking the motor first. I will tell you that I think the most difficult part of building a solar car is finding wheels. I think it is the very first thing you have to decide on, because you just don't go down to the local shop and say, hey, do you got some solar car wheels for me? And then once you have looked through all of the possible choices, you will be quickly discouraged when you realize that you have to hook up a motor somehow to it, that you have to hook up brakes to it, that somehow you have to put an axle through it, somehow it has to be able to pivot so you can steer. All of those things are way harder than you would anticipate, unless you throw money at it. Of course, if you throw money at it, all your problems can go away very, very quickly. There are two different types of cars that you'll see. Three-wheel designs obviously have the advantage of being lighter. The alignment part of it is much easier to do, and you can just drive that one rear wheel. Typically, it's a super easy. This is a very successful car that was built by the women's team in Houston, Mississippi. They won this race many, many times in the class. This is a classic division car. I think if you're going to build a solar car that you're going to drive on the road, I always worry about three wheels for lots of different reasons. One, if you get a flat, they're much harder to control, especially if it's your rear wheel. The rear end goes all over the place. And kind of a funny thing, and you never really think about this when you're racing at Texas Motor Speedway, but when you get out onto the road, you realize that you can't straddle things with three wheels. That pothole that you can straddle with your car, your regular automobile, you can't do that with a three-wheeled car. Something is going to hit that hole. And I always laugh to think about that dead animal that was on the road after we had left Texas Motor Speedway when we were heading to Pasadena, and how many cars had to hit this dead animal that was in the road because there was no other way to get around it. The four-wheel cars just straddled it, drove on, and say, oh, it's not a big deal. The three-wheel cars complained for the rest of the day how bad it smelled. So I would always make the case, if you're going to build a road-worthy car, that you add that fourth wheel. I think in general it does make it easier when you actually drive the car. There's a lot less things to worry about. There's obviously some more things to worry about. Alignment in the rear end can be very challenging to get things to line up. And you want to build some adjustability into that, I think. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Wheels. Lots of different choices. This is an example of an NGM wheel. Can you still buy those? I don't know.
If you, no.
No, the NGM's not making them or the motors anymore.
Okay. And a wheel like that typically would cost how much?
Well, they started out free and they went up to $600.
It's about $600 for that wheel, and that's just the wheel, right? I mean, that doesn't include any of the peripheral Starlink bearings and stuff like that for that. So when you go out and start to choose wheels, I think the things that you really have to think about right away is how are you going to attach brakes to it? How are you going to set it up so that you can stop your car? Because, for example, a bicycle wheel might work if your car is very, very light, and you have to attach some kind of rotor on there, some way to stop it. And we've played with that a fair bit with our cars. But if your car is heavy, a bicycle wheel is never going to cut it. Here's two options. The wheel over on the right is a wheel that we built for our urban concept car 1 year. It uses very heavy gauge spokes, and it has the contest we were in required a certain tire width for it. And then there's, of course, a motorcycle type wheel, but then you're restricted by what tires that you need to put on it. A little side note, a 20-inch bicycle wheel is almost exactly the same size as a 16-inch motorcycle wheel. And you can use those tires interchangeably between those two. So, I mean, if you had a big enough, this is just a wide bicycle rim here. It's reinforced that we had put a motorcycle tire on. So it fit right on there and inflated. It wasn't a problem. Of course, brakes would be the next issue. I think this is a no-brainer in most cases. This system set up by, say, MCP, who makes this brake system, is so easy to put in, where you have just the standard master cylinder that you can hook up a brake lever to, and then you have the caliper that closes on the disc. As long as you have a way to attach a disc to your wheel, really this system can't be easier to set up. And you only need to run one line to each caliper. Some of the fancier MCP setups have two lines going into them because they close the pistons from both sides. This is such a slick setup that it pushes on one side and still it compresses against the brake. Yeah, you have one here.
Right on the wheel, there's one.
Oh yeah, so when you come up later, make sure you look and see if there's one on these wheels, what it looks like, because it is the easiest way to do it. These calipers, I think I just bought them. The calipers are about $80 each, $80 or $90 each, and master cylinder is about $65 each. And then you can run high pressure plastic polyethylene hydraulic brake fluid tubes to it, and they're very flexible. You can run them all over your car. Super easy to set up, super easy for students to understand, super easy to bleed, and there's a lot of space in between. Yeah?
One thing I do want to point out that's real critical about hydraulic brakes is when we left Fort Worth last year, the team that I was with, I won't mention who they were, but they had hydraulic brakes and they had copper lines, good durable copper lines, and it went from one rear wheel over to the other rear wheel. It went right over the sprocket. They had a sprocket bolt shear. The chain came off. Chain came up. We hit the brake line. Broke the brake line. And they spent probably 4 hours repairing that single little short piece of brake line. When if they had routed it differently, put a little guard in front of it, it would have saved them an immense amount of work. So thinking during the design, what can possibly go wrong can save you hours of grief out on the highway. So just
And MCP is great.
little notice there.
Yeah, you can call them, they'll custom make rotors for you if you need bigger or smaller to handle the weight or whatever you're running. He's custom cut rotors a couple of times for us, that type of thing.
It's really easy to find.
Yeah.
It's easy to find the small parts for it to put things.
And these are spring-loaded rotors where your pads do not ride on, spring-loaded calipers where your pads do not ride on the rotors.
And you can adjust how far the pads are apart with little shims. So really, it covers a wide application setup, so you can do it lots of different ways. Your solar car has to have two completely independent brake systems in it, so that in the event that one of the brake systems fails, you have a backup. Here's the way we had it set up in one of our cars. This brake setup was for the front wheels. This was for the back wheel at that point. When you pushed on the pedal, both worked to stop the car. You can see that we actually have the pedals adjustable so that it distributes the forward and backwards braking a little bit. If a brake system goes bad, it almost always goes bad because it blows a line or leaks fluid, and that pedal just goes completely soft. In this case, you'd still be able to use the other pedal. Doctor?
Well, I was just going to say, I know that we all do things properly, but one of my first solar car teams didn't weld things according to how it should have been. We were in Battery Park in New York going through the evaluation of the Tour de Sol, and the guy said, take it as fast as you can and slam your foot on the brake, and we did. And the weld broke, and the whole brake mechanism went past the kid's head out the front window of the car. And we were traveling in Battery Park at 40 miles an hour trying to catch our solar car, which was headed for the river. So
that could not have been better timing, because the next thing I was going to say is that at the event, of course, your brakes are tested both as you sit and somebody tries to push on the car, and then also dynamically. They make you drive at a certain speed. Somebody is there with a radar gun, and you have to stop in a set distance. Lots and lots of cars struggle with this at events and have to go back and try to fix things. And I'll tell you, this is one of those things that you really should take care of before you leave your garage for the event, because it's nothing worse than having to play with hydraulic fluid, try to bleed brakes, try to figure out a way to do it at even the garage at Texas Motor Speedway, or worse, when you're on the side of the road somewhere along the way. So this is kind of a funny setup that we had done for a car. You can see the brake rotor and the caliper in there. This is kind of a fun suspension system that we had found. It's an old shock from a bicycle. It had a parallel piston type design, and so this goes up and this little piston assembly compresses. It works really, really slick. We just put an axle on there. You can't find them anymore, and if you do see one on eBay, chances are I'm going to outbid you for it right away, because we're trying to collect them for later use. When we start talking about suspension, lots of cars build suspension in here. I think when you get a chance later and you come up and see the suspension on this car, you'll be very impressed. I think it is a hard thing to design well. You can't just like guesstimate what it's going to be, because otherwise your car is going to be impossible to drive as you go down the road, or you're going to have such alignment problems that every time the wheels go up and down, they'll go in and out, or this way, that way, and you'll know you have a problem, because after you drive 50 miles the first day, you'll see that the tires are all worn off on the bottom. It does have a couple of important things. I think one of the most important things is right here, that it protects some really sensitive and expensive electrical components. Forget driver comfort. I could care less if my high school student in there is comfortable, because he's not. It's hot. They're driving a car that's very loud. If it's a little bumpy, it's no skin off my butt. And they're driving on the road. But it does protect the car. And there's lots of different ways to do that. A little research absolutely helps. And I think that the car, when you get a chance to see this, it's great. It's very impressive. Another example of one. I think this is off one of the college team's typical double A-arm type setup that runs out to Kingpin and to the car's wheel and brake. When you're building in the suspension, I always think that you need to add some adjustability to it. Do that in advance. Trying to change the adjustments as you go. This car, you can see that there are two eye bolts right here, so that we could adjust this wheel this way. So we knew when this car was going down the road that this aligned perfectly with this, and we could adjust that. So they went down the road. This is a carbon seat tub that we had built for a different contest, and it had four wheels, although it would work just as well as a solar car if you were perhaps lay it back just a little bit. One of the things that I'm always impressed with the Houston, Mississippi team is their attention to detail. They check the alignment in their car daily. You see those students out there every morning measuring to make sure that the front wheels are aligned. You see it go down the road. They never have. Do you have to change tires in a race? Never, because the alignment is so good that they have almost no tire wear. So you'll know if it's not aligned. Let's see, where are we on our schedule here? Maybe now would be a good time to just take a 5-minute break.
I'm thinking the same thing. Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back in.
Go to the bathroom, and then we'll talk about how we're going to power it.